Hey everybody, what's up? Back at school now, and looks like videos are going to be a lot more consistent and a lot more posting for the foreseeable future. So today we are getting into Novo Nordisk, huge titan in the pharmaceutical industry. Their stock price has been taking a beating recently. They are down a lot from their recent highs, and honestly, I think the company could now be in the undervalued territory. So we are going to get into the company, go through their financials, look at a little bit of some earnings reports, and that's about it. So if you're interested, make sure to subscribe and let's get into Novo Nordisk. So, getting into Novo Nordisk, I do have class in about 45 minutes, so we got to go through this pretty quickly. Novo Nordisk mostly focuses on diabetes and obesity care drugs, so things like Ozempic and Wegovy. I believe both of those are Novo Nordisk. Looking into some metrics, market cap is at 389 billion. So pretty big company. And actually, let's just show the recent stock price right off the bat here. So you could see fairly large drop from their all-time high. Currently, they are 40% below it. And a lot of this comes from the most recent earnings report, which we will get into in a little bit. But let's keep going through the stock here. So target price is at 119, 16% long-term growth rate. Right now we're at 87 a share. So overall looks decent, but now let's get into their growth summary. And you could see across the board, massively positive everywhere, which is a fantastic sign for the company. A lot of positivity here. With the way the price is looking right now, again, with this huge drop recently, I honestly think the company is in undervalued range because although they did have an enormous run up to get to this point, their value is absolutely here. Now, there are a lot of risks with this, like just government regulations and the risks of being a drug company with lawsuits and everything. But overall, I think that the company is definitely in a good position. So just looking at it here, you could see they have pretty heavily fallen off for the past 5 months or so now. So I do believe that they will recover from this fairly quickly, but it's just a matter of how quickly. But anyway, now let's get into the financials. So I will be zooming out to the years for this one because I think it'll paint a little bit of a better picture. So record sales in 2024, massively record sales, by the way. Ozempic and Wegovy have been huge recently, so the company is definitely benefiting a ton from that. Net income is incredibly positive, 13, almost 14 billion in profits in 2024. And also all of this is 100% in billions for the company, as you can see. So 39.3 billion dollars in sales in the past year. And that's also without complete data. So it's most likely significantly higher than that. They don't have the fourth quarter in yet. So it was a massive year for the company. So the fact that the stock chart looks like, let's go to the 1 year. The fact that the stock chart looks like this over the past year is not going to last very long, just based on how good the company has done in the past year. So going through a little bit more, you can see their shares overall have not very significantly dropped in any way. They are going down. And actually, if you look at the basic shares outstanding, you could see over the past decade or so, they have repurchased about 600 million shares or so. So overall, fairly solid. Actually, very, very good. Moving on to the balance sheet, let's see what we can see here. So overall, all right, we're going to the quarters because they don't have the updated data yet. So cash, 11 billion. Total assets is massively at an all-time high, which honestly I think is perfectly fine for the company. I think they have a ton of room to further drive their growth. Property, plant, equipment's at an all-time high. Current assets are at all-time high. Now, a lot of this growth is from Actually, not even a lot of it. Some of the growth is just from them getting more cash, but a lot of it is their property, plant, and equipment. They have a lot more intangible assets. So overall, we're just seeing growth in the company completely. Now, moving into their debt, they do have just about 8.5 billion in total debt. But honestly, just with the way their cash situation is, that is no big deal at all. Even their overall long term debt is very, very manageable. Short term debt is under a billion. So overall, for their sort of liquidity and everything, they're in a very, very good position. Now, getting into cash flows, operating cash flow looks fantastic, very, very positive. And as you can see, over 2024, we saw some record numbers: 7.3 billion, 6.5 billion in operating cash flows. That is very, very good. Now, going along with that, those same quarters, we saw a lot of investing cash flows going out of the company. Now, a lot of that is purchasing investments, which is perfectly fine, but there's also an increase in capital expenditures, which is to be expected, but definitely, I wouldn't say it's too big of a deal just based on how much operating cash flows increased. And these really didn't increase nearly as much as those other increases. So, other than that, financing activities look pretty good. They did sell a ton of stock in their June quarter, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. As you can see, they clearly have been repurchasing a lot as well. And I really don't think there really shouldn't have been much of a need to sell that much stock. It could have been for a specific reason, but overall, it's no big deal here. And looking at their overall free cash flows, they look fantastic. They kind of struggled a bit in the beginning of 2024, but it looks like it could be a little bit of a seasonality thing where their December quarter is just kind of an underperforming quarter, as you can see with 2022 and 2023 here. So, no real problems, in my opinion, there. You could see they clearly very heavily recovered. And actually, they most likely had their largest free cash flow quarter ever just a couple months ago. So, overall, I think everything looks very good there. Visualizing their sales growth a little bit, you can see they have been very, very solid over the past just about 4 years, massive amounts of sales growth. And most of that is from Ozempic, which we'll see a little bit when I go over their metrics. Um, but anyway, getting into the ratios, gross margin, of course, it doesn't have 2024. Let's go into the quarters so we can get some recent data here. So gross margin is at 84.6, basically in line with everything else, actually a slight increase over the past few years. SGA to sales are decreasing over the quarter, but overall they're still right around that 40% range, actually a little bit on the lower end as well, which is very good. Operating margin at 43.8 looks like it is close to the higher end of their past couple years. And then net margin is at 35, which again is at the higher end of what we've seen in the past few years. So overall, everything here looks really, really solid. The health and stability of this company look really good, in my opinion. Debt to equity came down over the past quarter, but overall it's higher than it has been in the past 2 years, which really isn't that crazy. 43% is a very healthy number for any company, especially a company like this that has a ton of cash, a ton of free cash flow. So overall, I don't think their debt to equity here being at 43% is a big deal at all. Anything under 80% is healthy for a company. So being in this range is perfectly fine. But anyway, now let's move into a little bit of their recent earnings. So some metrics here from their Q3 report. We can see diabetes and obesity. And by the way, all of this is in Danish kroner, unfortunately, which is fine, but it'll just be a little bit harder to visualize. But the increases and decreases are still there. So diabetes and obesity, we saw a 2 billion, just about $1.5 billion miss, actually. Most of that, I think, is coming from the diabetes section where they missed by over 2 billion. Long-acting insulin passed by about 300 million. Premix insulin came in 100 million over. Fast-acting missed by about 200 million. And then some other things. Looks like human insulin beat by 300 million. Other came in a little bit under. And then obesity drugs came in at about a billion over. So Wegovy really drove that. They had just almost a 2 billion increase. Their rare disease segment also beat by about 300 million as well. So overall, fairly solid. However, a lot of things missed, such as if we go here, we could see Ozempic actually came in under estimates, which isn't terrible, but with how huge Ozempic has been recently, I think a lot of people were expecting it to beat their estimates. And just to be clear, their estimates were most likely, I don't want to say hyped, but that's probably the best word for it right now. They were hyped up a little bit just because of how big Ozempic has been. But I really think that it's still a solid number, even though they did come in a little bit short. But I think people are just kind of seeing that as being a decrease in demand. So even though the overall earnings report wasn't too bad, they still did not really surpass. So you could see the stock price has been mostly on a downtrend since that report came out. And now we have a new one coming out in just about a week. So definitely pay attention to that. That'll be very important to see what happens there. But overall, let's also go over this. So they just disclosed a new acquisition of Catalent and 3 new manufacturing sites. So fairly solid. Acquisition is expected to impact the financial outlook of the year with low single-digit negative impact on operating growth and negatively impact free cash flow with the $11.7 billion acquisition price. So overall, the acquisition, because they're spending so much on it, is expected to affect their profitability a little bit. But overall, I don't think it's that bad. But for the most part, this will be a very good thing for the company. One other thing to note, which is kind of negative, Novo Nordisk is not expected to initiate a share buyback program in 2025. Not great. With how much cash they have, I would honestly like to see it, but obviously they're spending close to 12 billion on this acquisition, so it does make sense. But overall, still buying back shares is a positive thing, but also having acquisitions is a positive thing. So either way, it's a win. But yeah. So now looking at their stock price, we can see where they have grown from in the past and just kind of their support line here. So it wouldn't shock me to see them hit this range again, just based on where they have been in the past. You could see they've hit this support area 3 times now. And I honestly think they could see that 70, possibly anywhere 70 to 75 range fairly soon, just based on what has been happening. However, that could also be reversed by this earnings report, depending on how good it is. If it's not great, I would expect the 70, right around $70 range coming next week. But if it's good, we could see this gap get filled all the way up back up to 100. I think that's definitely the 2 best price points to focus on, but overall, we'll have to see. So anyway, that is all I have for Novo Nordisk today. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you learned something. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't, and I will see everybody in the next video. Thanks for watching.